Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, February 2nd, and welcome back to the Right Angle Sports YouTube channel. As today, we've reached the end. It is Super Bowl preview Q&A live stream here on the channel, the final live stream of the NFL season. Fun to see what these shows have grown into. I'll tell you a quick story. Back when it was September 2nd or 3rd, just moved into the new place here in White Rock, got a message after moving in. It was a long weekend of unpacking and getting things sorted, getting ready for the NFL season. Got a text from Jeff, and he's like, hey, why don't you try this? Just go live on YouTube, do a Q&A, see what happens. We got like 200 viewers. Last week's show, almost 10,000. So fun to do these each and every week. Fun to see how this show has grown. And that is a big appreciation to each and every one of you who has listened to the show, tuned in, participated in the live chat. And hopefully we can wrap up here on a good note. For anybody who is joining after the fact, you can jump forward in the timestamps below. I'll put it by topic and kind of conversation direction as we go through the live stream. So if you're here for something specific, you can jump through to get to that certain time. And if you're just hanging out for the live stream, the live chat is open. We'll see the numbers go up. We'll see everybody participate. There's so many questions around the Super Bowl. Just keep throwing them at me. I'd love to answer them, get into a whole bunch of topics. Whichever way you want to take this show, let's go that direction. Let's get you an answer as we wrap up the NFL season. Quickly want to say hello to everybody back in the live chat. Nathan, he was ready Wednesday morning at like 7:30 in the morning, fired a DM. Is the show going to happen today? The show didn't happen on Wednesday. I was going to do it next week. I said, you know what? Let's get it out of the way before the weekend. Everybody's got things to do. Let's give you the thoughts. It's the Super Bowl. Decided to go live here on a Friday morning. So Nathan is back. Couldn't make it Wednesday. He's here on Friday morning. Has been here for all the shows. Good to have you back for another morning. Same thing goes to Jay Nava, back for another show. He's here every week as well. So is Crazy Carl. No offense, but I hope you guys lose the 49ers pick already with the disagreement in the chat. Couldn't bring myself to bet against my team in the Super Bowl. Completely reasonable, Carl. Wouldn't blame you for doing that. Y'all don't understand how badly the Chiefs fans deserve the Super Bowl. It's been 12 long months. Yeah, must be nice. Must be nice. As a Jets fan myself, hopefully one day can experience something like this. Unfortunately, wasn't alive in 1967. I will say, after this NFL season and then how much work and effort has gone into it, the age is starting to show on the face. But hopefully I don't look too much older by the time the Jets get to a Super Bowl like your Chiefs have, Carl. Jay Karma back for another show. Good morning. Andrew Smith Garzon, buenos dias. Buenos dias to you as well. Andrew, where are you messaging from? Would be curious to know on that one too. Raider Nation, Garrett Stone, Luke back as well, says love the show. Parker says let's roll. Garrett says let's give this thing one last go then to chasing that white ball around. I hope so. There's a spot right here on the wall as I'm kind of redoing the office. We'll have another flag from a course that's been number one on my list to play. 2 weeks from now, we'll be teeing off right at this time. So very much looking forward to that one after the Super Bowl is over. Can take a little bit of an exhale. Connor's putting the over-under at 59.5 minutes, and we'll keep it under, Connor, I promise. Last week's show, an hour and a half on 2 games, was a big one, so we'll keep it a little bit quicker. Also seeing K-Hawk as well. Parker Norton asking for the Taylor Swift prop best bet. Don't know if I can help you on that one, Parker, unfortunately. If you have any that you're considering, throw them at me. And I would love to rebuttal any of these conspiracies that are being thrown around as well. Nav is down in Las Vegas in the epicenter. Let the traffic begin. Is it going to be worse than the F1? There's no way it can be worse than that for traffic conditions, right? I could be wrong on that, but I think it's going to be a very, very busy week. I know a few media folks that are going down as well. They're all really excited for the week too. So would be curious to know how it goes for anybody who is attending, whether you're tweeting or sending direct messages, anyone going down to the game. I hope you have a fantastic time in Las Vegas. It's certainly going to be great. Dice is asking, will you be watching the Live Golf event in Mayakoba? I don't even know where it's streaming now. Is it still CW? When it was on YouTube, I was actually tuning in. I don't even know how to watch it now. And I'm certainly not watching the disaster at Pebble. I hate that event. I will say it was cool to see the field elevated and you're getting all top guys over on the PGA side, but I don't know if I'll be watching the Live. I don't even know where to go to watch it, to be honest. Unfortunately, the Nelly and Lydia playoff last Sunday kind of got overshadowed by 2 NFL games. Rightfully so. But Yeah, I would love to watch it in Mayakoba. That's an awesome course to watch play, but I don't know. K-Hawk says, you're going to Bandon Dunes. Nope, going to Pasatiempo, just outside in Santa Cruz. Very much have wanted to play that for years, and now I'm sneaking in between the renovations. So driving down with the dog after the Super Bowl and going to play Pasatiempo as well. That's been number one on my list forever. I was trying to do it last year when I came back, but they had the renos going on, and so I couldn't get in at the right time. Now I'm lucky enough to be able to find that right window. So I can't wait for that one. It's going to be a dream round 2 Fridays from now for sure. Okay. Let's get to a couple more questions before I jump into the previews. We're starting to see different questions coming in about the game, about the props. Just keep firing them in. If I miss it, bring it up later as I go. And I'll try to get to everyone that you guys have in this chat. I'll give a quick preview. We'll go from both sides, what to expect on both sides. And I'll kind of try give you directions for players you can look at, different angles you can look at. The tough part about Super Bowl props from a standpoint of going on a live stream and giving them to a wide audience is there's so many, first of all, but books kind of have different extra offerings, so to speak. This year's Super Bowl specifically, small point spread, relatively average total. A lot of the game props that are kind of standard offerings are just really easy to price. You kind of know what you're getting into. There's not like a lot of value in those. And so it's a lot of the kind of additional extra stuff that I think is more interesting, but it's kind of hard because of availability. So I'll kind of give you a wide range of things to go at it. If you have anything specific, drop it in the chat and I'll try to get to it specifically to try to give you some angles on that too. So with all that said, let's start and get into it. If you have yet to read the newsletter, which went out this morning, or you're not a subscriber to the service, if you want to subscribe to the off-season newsletter, you can do so at adamchernoff.com. It is powered by Right Angle Sports. As always, the latest edition of that went out this morning at 4 a.m. Pacific time and broke down the play that we had from the service on the San Francisco 49ers to wrap up the service. I want to just touch on a comment that I saw come up, and there were people asking or saying it's a little bit frustrating because they're subscribers to the service, but then they see me talking about the pick. And I did it with the Ravens, our last release that was from the service. I'm doing it now with the 49ers. Unfortunate part about the NFL when you're trying to marry content and a service is when you have a week with 2 games, or in this case, 1 game, and there is a release on it, kind of hard to talk about it and do content and do media without mentioning that. And so you can't watch media and get all the plays from the service. You have to be obviously a subscriber to get everything. There is unfortunately a little bit of crossover. This is another one of those weeks. So if you are in that boat and you're a little angry, I'm sorry for that. Just the way that the schedule obviously shortens to the end of the season, you get crossover, and that's what we're getting to in this as well. Elizabeth says that she loves the email newsletter. So if you haven't read it yet, it's in your email inbox. If you haven't subscribed, it's free to subscribe. You'll get emails every Friday in the off season. Had a big breakdown on the 49ers and why I think they can win the Super Bowl. And I'll kind of reiterate on that, and we'll expand as we go into some of the props. So I think it makes the most sense right now to start discussing just the price that we are at, which is San Francisco -2, and it's a cheap 2. And for clarification standards, the bet that we have is on the money line on San Francisco at -125. That is now higher, -130, -135. In general, the rule of thumb is with Super Bowls, especially on these shorter point spreads, is on game day. That is when you have what could be the cheapest money line for the second go around, because when people are betting this later in the week, if you like the Chiefs, you're taking the money line at plus money. If you like the 49ers, you're typically laying the spread or playing into alternates. And this is a question I already saw come up from Nathan. Says thoughts on laddering alternate Niners spread 6.5, 13.5, 19.5. That shows up. That's a real opinion. And that's why you typically find a money line price that's a little bit more condensed for the point spread compared to what you would get in the regular season. I think that's the case. Now I think it's fair. I think if it's going to move, you see a chance later it comes back. So if you're dying to get that later, you can see it. But the bet is on the San Francisco 49ers on the money line. And I referenced the aggregate market ratings, which look at 6 different models that create point spreads from their model outputs. and the aggregate ratings, take all of those numbers, put them together, and then they have a power rating for NFL teams from 1 to 32 with a neutral field point spread value. If you went back to Christmas, you would see that this matchup would have the 49ers favored by 5.5 points based on aggregate ratings. And that was looking at the regular season work as a whole. So the first 16 games of the regular season based on performance in those games and how the 6 models looked at those teams, they would have made the 49ers a 5.5 point favorite. We are now obviously at 2. In my opinion, this entire handicap is based around how do we go from 5.5 just a month ago to 2 now? And is there any noise in between then and now that we can strip out or talk about that has fueled this change in price and change in opinions on these teams? I will say from just the sentiment side of things, it's night and day for the Kansas City Chiefs versus where we were late December to where we are now. I mean, everybody is talking and thinking about this team in a completely different way. And we've discussed it a lot here on the show too. The fundamental changes that they've had at the line of scrimmage, the increased pace, the increased speed getting to the line. We've broken all of that down, and it's very real. This team is operating much quicker earlier in the games. They're getting to the line quicker, and it's making a big impact on their offense. It's a different offense. And I think the biggest talking point in general around this game is you have Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. You have Andy Reid calling the good plays. You have all of these little lines that support the Chiefs just because it's so different, and our expectations for the Chiefs are so high that when you see it, you just assume that it is right. And I can't help but feel the 49ers have kind of had the opposite sentiment, especially the last few weeks, put upon them. They've played really poorly the last 2 games. They've been in many ways fortunate to end up winning those games. It's a team that's historically under Shanahan had a lot of difficulty playing from behind. They've needed to do it, and they've got in against the Packers and the Lions, who didn't come into the playoffs, I would say, nearly in the same caliber or the same rating as you would have for the Bills or you would have for the Ravens, who are among the tops in the NFL. And so now there's this added part that the 49ers are lucky to get to the Super Bowl after being very fortunate against weaker teams, while the Chiefs are on this historically difficult playoff run to get to the Super Bowl. And now you have this team elevating back to what we expected it to be. And you have the 49ers coming back to earth in a big way with the overrated system quarterback and Shanahan choking in the playoffs. And all of this, the last couple of weeks, is, in my opinion, what has really led to this price dropping down. And the reason I say that with a lot of confidence is when you think about the teams, right? Nothing has changed. And if anything, you're going to say, like, personnel-wise, the Chiefs are actually the team that has suffered the most injuries. They have the most changes. They lost Tooney. They lost Menahu, right? If you're just going to look at personnel changes or anything, you would probably be downgrading the Chiefs slightly. And so the fact that the Niners don't have any changes, the Niners don't have any injuries, it's a game with a bye week in between, played indoors with no weather factors or no elements or no external factors that impact the point spread or total directly. You have to point to performance in recent games as what is driving this point spread down. Where I start to see noise in some of these numbers is around the Chiefs' offensive performance. And if we want to talk to it on a play-by-play basis, which I think is a fair way to do, rather than just going final score and how you got there, if you look at the play-by-play basis and look at EPA per play specifically, the Chiefs in these last 3 playoff games have improved to a level that would have had them 4th in the regular season in EPA per play. During the regular season, weeks 1 to 18, they finished 11th. They've been playing at a level that is 4th. So the offense is elevated, and there's a number that you can put on how that offense is elevated. My question is, and I think what kind of structures this whole handicap is, what percent of this jump from the Chiefs playing at a level that was 11th during the regular season to a level that's 4th in the playoffs, what percent of this jump is real? And I say real because it's hard to ignore the fact that they played a Dolphins team that was riddled with injuries on the defensive side. The Chiefs kept 2 and 3 tight ends on the field for the majority of the game. It was like 40% of snaps. They forced the Dolphins to use linebackers in the middle of the field they didn't have, and they were able to have a lot of offensive success. The weather certainly aided Kansas City in that way. It was the best the Chiefs offense had looked in several weeks leading up to that. You have to go back to probably October for the Chargers game to find a spot where the Chiefs offense looked that good like it did against the Dolphins. Against the Bills, you get Buffalo off 5 days rest, the shortest playoff rest in NFL history, with defensive injuries of their own. Kansas City had another great offensive game. Against the Ravens, in the first quarter specifically, the first quarter against Baltimore was the third best individual quarter from an offensive output standpoint that the Chiefs have had in the entire season. They played their third best quarter offensively against the Ravens. After that, past the 12-minute mark of the second quarter, the Chiefs only scored 3 points. And so I look at this and say, like what percent is real? If it's all real, you're getting a Chiefs offense that's playing to a level that's fourth in the NFL. That's terrific. It's a big increase. I think there's a chance that it's not 100% real. I think it's a high number, right? But what percent is it? I think that's an important question to ask when you're looking at this handicap, rather than saying it's Mahomes in the playoffs, it's Reed in the playoffs, it's the better plays, it's right. There's a lot of that. And I think that some of it is certainly true. I don't think it's 100% true with how these teams have been coming in that the Chiefs have faced. I don't believe that it's the most difficult run to the Super Bowl we've seen in history, like DVOA is suggesting. I don't buy that. I don't think that it is true. I think that that's overinflating what the Chiefs are, which is a very, very good football team with the best quarterback in football. I think that these storylines are making it out to be a little bit better than it actually is. Now, on the other side, you have the San Francisco 49ers, who, if we just kind of look like surface level at what has happened the last couple of weeks, it's Brock Purdy struggling as a system quarterback. It's Kyle Shanahan as a head coach continuing to choke in the playoffs. It's an incredibly overrated defense. A lot of these points are being brought up. The Niners have still found a way to win the last two games. But again, let's go to the play-by-play data and put some numbers to this. Like, what have the Niners been doing the last 2 weeks relative to how we're talking about the 49ers? If you look at the offense led by Brock Purdy, in the two playoff games, the 49ers have played to an EPA play level that is higher than their regular season mark, which was number one in the NFL. And they've played to a defensive EPA per play mark allowed that would rank them dead last in the NFL. To put that in context and comparison, during the regular season, they were 10th defensively. So despite all the criticism and how bad it's looked and how clunky it has been, we have a point here where the 49ers offense has actually increased on the top level of play that they showed on the field for the duration of the regular season in these two playoff games. Everybody's criticizing them. They've actually played better on an EPA per play basis. It's the defense which has fallen off a cliff. I mean, for this unit to go from 10th to a level that would be 32nd, worse than Arizona, worse than Washington, over the course of two games against effectively the exact same game plan, it is kind of unthinkable when you consider the veteran presence that exists on this roster. And so I asked the same question again. What percent of this drop-off is true? Are you sitting here right now watching this live stream and saying this defense with Warner and Greenlaw and Bosa and Armstead and Hargrave and Ward, are you sitting here and saying this defense is the worst defense in football? Because if you're believing that the drop-off the last 2 weeks for the 49ers defense is as significant as it has looked, that's what you're saying, because that is the level of play that the 49ers have put forth on the field the last 2 weeks against the Packers and Lions, the dead worst in the NFL. It's unthinkable that the drop has been this far. And so if you're, again, what percent of this is real? If you're saying 100%, you're saying that the 49ers defense is the worst in the NFL. That's the level of play they've been at the last 2 weeks on a per play basis. Again, like, I don't believe that is true. I don't think that this defense is the worst in the NFL. I don't think they play to that level for a third game in a row. But what makes this such a fun game and a fun handicap is what percentage of that is true. Because if it is required the Chiefs offense to look as it has and play to this level, combined with the 49ers defense to look this bad and to play to this level, to get us from 5.5 to 2 in the span of 4 weeks, because there's nothing else that's impacting this game that would change it. If we're basing this solely off of recent performance, I don't think that you can get from 5.5 to 2, because I don't believe the Chiefs offense is quite as good as they have looked because of the schedule they have faced. And I certainly don't believe that the 49ers defense is as bad as they have looked the last couple weeks. I don't get there. And that's really, when it comes to just like the core of this handicap and this price, that's really why the bet on the 49ers was made. It's too big of an adjustment. And an interesting comment that I would kind of have to take you kind of behind the scenes a little bit. We've been debating releasing the 49ers probably the last 4 weeks. And it's been really, really close. Last week, Bob went right before us, and he ended up getting that. The number went up when we couldn't get the flat 7 in the first game against the Packers. The price was just kind of lingering, just a slight bit too high. Never quite came in enough, couldn't get it. Against the Ravens, there was the back and forth debate before that price got bet up significantly. And so we've kind of been looking at the 49ers as the team we want to play on, because we've kind of felt this sentiment for a while. And we've been fortunate to kind of like dodge the landmine, so to speak, because we're using it in the chat to avoid these losses with San Francisco. But now it's like this is the big correction in the market against the 49ers. And quite frankly, it's just gone too far. And so to get San Francisco minus 125 on the money line, I think is really interesting from a price and handicap perspective. And that's where I would be at. Going to catch up in the questions. Lots of them coming in. Fell a little bit behind as I get into these downhill rants. So let me catch up on these questions and see what we have quickly. I'll go rapid fire. We'll catch up, and then we'll go matchups on each side. Michael says Chiefs away field advantage at Allegiant Stadium. Already played there this and previous years. First of all, how painful is it to be a Raiders fan? You just move into this giant stadium. You've got everything optimistic with the Pierce hiring. And now you have to watch either your big in-division rival, the Chiefs, win a Super Bowl in your stadium, or you have to look at the 49ers, your old sort of regional rival, win the Super Bowl in your stadium. So it's a rough one for the Raiders, no matter what happens in this game. I get the impression it's going to be a pretty split crowd, Michael. I would say, if anything, you might see more 49ers red than you would see Chiefs red, but I don't think there's much in this either way for Chiefs or 49ers. Garrett says, with being on the 49ers, would like to discuss some MVP thoughts. If we think it's not Purdy, I think there's some value in that market. Currently hold a Debo ticket from 65 to 1 from 2 weeks ago. That was in the newsletter as a breakdown last Friday. Thoughts? Garrett, I agree with Debo. Let's table that and get to the props a little bit later in the show, but let's circle back on that. I agree with Debo. Certainly at 20 to 1, I'm not running in to play it. But if you have that earlier MVP ticket like Nathan has as well from last week, that I think is a really good bet to be sitting on for sure. So, Sean, how much weight do you put on recent performance versus full season? I think the Chiefs have been better recently, and the Niners have been better over the full season. This came in at the beginning of my rant, so it's a great question that I hope I kind of semi-answered in that breakdown. But to me, this is the handicap. When does, like, what are you weighting more? Are you weighting the 17-game regular season more? When are you dropping off? When are you starting to weight games less? Are you valuing recent performance more? I think the value that the market visually has put on this number is weighting recent performance too much, whereas I tend to value a longer time span more in the handicap. That's how I would look at that in that too. Mitchell, Paul, this is great. I'll answer it now. Karlaftis or Jones over to a quarter at plus money, or Bosa. Easy decision. Chris Jones over a quarter of the sack in this. If you can get like the yes, no on a sack individually rather than the 0.25 at a better price. I think Chris Jones to get a sack is going to be a good one. The way they can mix and match where they put him on the defensive line, the weakness on the right side of the 49ers offensive line has been there all season. Big games is what he's there for. And you also have Omenihu out, which in theory you would say it allows the 49ers to double team more. I think what it does is allow Jones to have more of the potential sacks in this game for himself. And so I would look at Jones for sure at that at plus money. I think that is a good bet in that too. Josh says, love a sack prop on Kinlaw. Has been steady, getting better and better each week. Plus lines. Yes, at left guard, you have no Tooney, very, very likely in the Super Bowl. So you have the backup. Josh, I'm going to get, I don't have an opinion on Kinlaw. I have an opinion on another linebacker. I think there's another good prop there. We'll get into that for sure as well, but I don't have an opinion on Kinlaw. Here is DT plus the points, hoping for 49ers and Debo MVP. Me too. Do you agree that the only path for Debo MVP is at least through one big play rushing in rec to combat Purdy and CMC? I think the biggest hurdle Debo has to get by is McCaffrey just having a monster game, which I think that he will. And we'll talk about that in the matchups in a second. It was the Seattle game in December. If you want to look at the path for Debo to get MVP, go look at the box score from the Seattle game in December. I think the 49ers scored like 28 points, but it was Debo with, I can't remember his total yardage, it was like 125. Gets the touchdown or two, gets the rush attempts, gets involved in the pass game, led the team last week in targets and receptions. It'll be those high leverage plays close to the red zone. That's how it's going to happen when you pad it with touchdowns. What he does so well is not really directly correlated to what Purdy does well. It's not like if Kelsey, the voting gets Kelsey weird, but just for simplistic example, if Kelsey has a big game, it's hard for him to do something without Mahomes. Debo can do a lot of things without Purdy, and he can do things that visually look a lot different than what other receivers can do too, which is why I think there's some value there too. So yes, I agree with that, but I would look at that Seattle game too. I have no idea how to respond to this. Thank you to speaking to us like the adults we are, Adam. Let's see if conspiracy talk shows up in the chat about this Swift stuff, Jim. I might go off on another rant like I did last weekend, but I try to keep it between the lines and keep a little bit reasonable for this as well. Ryan, I don't think too much, if anything at all. I think that's, again, I just don't see that being a massive factor in this. I think it's being, I think the recent performance is having much more of an impact than anything else. Sebastian says, I think what has honestly helped the Chiefs is that they have shortened the rotation in the receiver room. No more Sky Moore, no more Tony, no more James, addition by subtraction. So yes, I agree with you. There was the emphasis to simplify play calling. It's been a lot of Pacheco. It's been a lot of Kelsey. It's been a lot of Rice. They've trusted the guys they value the most to get them to the Super Bowl and then go through the playoffs. I think Reed goes really deep into the playbook in this game, and I will be very curious to see what kind of props we get on these other guys that have been on the edge, specifically Tony. I think there's involvement for him in the Super Bowl. I think we see the Chiefs go a lot deeper into the playbook than what they had to do against the Ravens, especially in the second half, and what they had to do in the first two games as well, where they were pretty comfortable throughout the game. So yes, Sebastian, I agree. I think the Super Bowl, you're going to see some of those names pop up again. And I haven't seen a lot of props on those guys, many places. Those will be coming out, I think, later as we get through next week. That'll be interesting to look at for sure. Quickly catching up on the questions. GS brings up a very good point. Defense is less stable than offense. It most certainly is. And that's why I think it's hard to look at this adjustment and fully believe that the Niners are going to like 100% be what they have been the last couple of weeks. I completely agree with that. And it bears worth mentioning the fact that as bad as they have looked and playing to this level, they still got away with wins in both of these games too, against two very, very good offenses. So yes, I agree with you on that completely for sure. Couple more questions. Appreciate all of these coming in, guys. Again, if I miss something and you know you're seeing the answers to questions come in after and you want to get it back in because you really want the answer, just keep dropping it in the bottom, and that'll show up too. So I'll try to get to everything that you have specifically. Josh says, I think the Niners DBs match up really well against KC wide receivers. Going to be tough for Rice and MVS to get open versus Ward and Lenore. Hopefully Warner and Greenlaw can cover Kelsey. So I don't know what Wilkes is going to do here. I'll talk. Let me get into the Niners defensive matchup stuff here, because I think it's really interesting. So last season, in week 7, the 49ers played the Chiefs, and Andy Reid embarrassed the 49ers defense, which was it was a different defense, but it's still, the majority of the parts are still there. What he did was attack the wide 9 that the 49ers play. And it was Hardman being used on outside runs, on pitch plays, outside rushes with different backs. Like, everything was attacking the width. And what they did by attacking the width was allow these aggressive edges that the 49ers have to get downfield. And effectively on the pass rush, a second into the play, they were eliminated because the Chiefs were going out wide past them, and the Niners just couldn't contain it. And so it turned into just a monster Mahomes game for his numbers, and it turned into just a monster offensive output for the Chiefs as a whole. What we have seen the last 2 weeks from the Lions and the Packers is effectively attacking the exact same thing. When you look on YouTube at the highlights of the Chiefs game from last year in week 7, and you compare it visually to what the Lions and the Packers did, it's the same plays attacking the same weakness of the 49ers defense. And typically what teams have done, like I think about the Raiders game, for example, against the Chiefs, where the offense looked really, really bad. It was being very aggressive outside on the receivers, which was uncharacteristic for the Raiders to do. And then it was just bringing a ton of pressure up front and causing a lot of trouble for Mahomes. There have been teams that have played the Chiefs offense that have effectively gambled out wide, saying that we don't trust these wide receivers to beat us downfield, so we're going to gamble a little, and we're just going to dedicate more effort to pressure up front and force the ball out of Mahomes' hands quicker, and we'll see if these wide receivers can hold up. That, in many ways, is not something that the Niners ever do. This is a Niners team that is very content rushing for, dropping everyone else in coverage, and just kind of absorbing what other offenses have. And where I think the most interesting matchup kind of quirk that may come from this game is Wilkes going to do kind of like, I think back to the Pats-Rams Super Bowl, and Belichick went with a lot of like 6-1 fronts that really countered what the Rams were doing with outside zone and took away those plays and forced the offense to be quite different. Like, does Wilkes go that direction? Or does Wilkes play a lot more man? The San Francisco 49ers play the second most zone. We saw the Ravens in the first half play a lot of zone. They said, hold on a minute, this isn't working. Went more man heavy, and all of a sudden the Chiefs didn't score in the second half. Like, did the 49ers gamble completely and throw wrinkles where they go with a lot more man coverage out wide and say, like, if you want to beat us deep, fine, go do it. But we're not going to just sit here and let Mahomes go 4, 7, 9 yards down the field every single play and get in the end zone because we know you're not making mistakes. I don't know what they are going to do. The reason I'm optimistic about the 49ers defense is because not only do they have last year's tape on what the Chiefs did, which was just humiliating to this defense, not only do they have that to look at and say, okay, what do we learn from that? They have the last 2 weeks, which is the same thing. It was the same game plan. It was the same attack. Like, if Steve Wilkes and this defensive staff have a full week to prepare and at least put together some game plan to contain this big weakness that everybody is criticizing the 49ers for. If they can't do that with the extra week to prepare, as great as Reid and Mahomes are, I have a hard time it would be coaching malpractice at the highest level is the wording I used in the newsletter. I can't see this defense no showing for a third week in a row against what is likely to be a very similar game plan, especially with this veteran defensive presence that's on the field. I have a hard time believing that is going to happen with the extra time to prepare. And so, Josh, I think you're right. If they play it in a man-centric way out wide, I don't know if they will. And I think that makes it interesting. So I think it's a very good comment from you, Josh. I wish I could say, like, this is what's going to happen. I don't know. I can't envision a spot where it's that big of a struggle again for the defense. John K says, do you put any stock in the fact that 20% of the fan go to the MVP award, which I would imagine skews towards Travis Kelce with the Taylor Swift factor? It's a fun thing to talk about. I don't know. The hard part with the MVP award is the other 80%. And this number is like, it's getting skinnier. Like, it's so hard to figure out who is going to vote for what and project that. And I don't know. I think it's a really interesting comment, but if the other 80% isn't voting for Kelce and they're just automatically going to go for Mahomes, does that make Kelce immediately more valuable? I don't know. It's hard to say. I think if you're looking at a path for Kelce MVP, man, you probably need 2 touchdowns, 100 plus. Like, it's got to be a dominant game. But again, it's just so connected to anything that Mahomes is going to do. It's going to be tough to get that other 80% to go away from Mahomes. I think it's kind of like a built-in vote if the Chiefs do well and win. And so I think that's tough, even with that 20% contributing. Nathan went back and looked for Seattle. 149 receiving yards, 1 rushing TD, 1 receiving TD. That's kind of the path for Debo to get it. He may not need 149. He'll need 100 plus, but when he gets the mix down in the red zone, we saw him used again last week when things were tight at the goal line. I think he gets those plays. And again, those plays, they're not attached to Purdy, and they obviously won't have McCaffrey on the receiving end in the box score. It just, Debo's kind of like a little bit disconnected in terms of how he could perform to garner some of those votes, unlike a Kelce Mahomes connection too. Jeremy says the new Chiefs always utilized against the Bengals. That was the first game that they debuted it. They did not have any snaps with single digits in the play clock in the first half. That's when we saw the debut of all that tempo. Nathan says Tony is back. I think he will be for sure. Jeffrey the giraffe, come again. At least it wasn't. What was the one on the release show? If anyone remembers, that really got me. I don't think I got anything here. How concerned are you if the 49ers are losing second half? Ravens panicked and Shanahan has history of not making correct decisions. So, good question. Shanahan's issues primarily have been just really conservative and tight play calling relative to the clock and situation. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm thinking, like, I don't know if there's been a big game plan where Shanahan has no-showed. He's too good for that to happen. If you remember one, please drop it in the chat. Like, I know timing decisions, not a strong suit of Shanahan, but game planning, he tends to always get it right. And like last week against the Lions, ton of passing against the weakness of the Lions. You can argue that even with some of those runs, they maybe even still ran a little bit too much in the first half. But recognized the weakness, took advantage of it. Purdy had a big game. Offense bounced back. Big numbers for San Francisco. Against the Chiefs, what you're referencing here, the Ravens panicked. The Todd Monken game plan last week was as bad of a game plan in a game we've seen postseason, regular season almost ever. Like, it was horrendous. And I think about the Ravens now in hindsight. You have the first time OC in that spot, big stage. You have youth at skill positions. It's almost like, to me, these guys, the moment was too big for them, and they overthought what the game plan should have been and ended up just kind of screwing themselves out of what could have been optimal. The 49ers are not going to fall into that same category. My worry of them coming out with a horrible offensive game plan with just guys melting down, with the defense no showing. I don't see that happening in this game. Coaching staff has been there, done that in big games, in the Super Bowl for Shanahan a couple times. The game plans have been good. The offense has got out and had big, like it's been great when you look at it. I don't think he's going to outsmart himself, and we see the 49ers come out, and rather than operating out of 2 back sets and 2 tight end sets, which they do at the highest rate in the league, like I would be shocked and blown away if this is the 49ers 70% 3 wide receiver sets like the Ravens last week, where the 49ers are going to say, hey, we're going to spread things out and take on your defensive backs because that's where we think we can win. I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think the panic is going to cause that. Could we see like situational blunders? Absolutely. I think that's always in play for a Shanahan coach game. I don't think from a game plan perspective, we're going to see him whiff on this one. Emran brings up a point. Do you guys really think the Chiefs lose to the 49ers when they just beat the Ravens? So from a content creation standpoint, and just like I'm a bettor and have a Twitter account and I talk about betting a lot, that the Chiefs as a public made pick, like in terms of someone making a pick on the Chiefs this week, is like the ultimate content free roll for a bet. And this is not to criticize any bets made on the Chiefs, but like to this point, if you pick the Chiefs this week and the Chiefs go up 14-0 in the first quarter, anyone who bet the 49ers is just going to take heat, because it's going to be, how could you ever think that Brock Purdy would beat Patrick Mahomes and Kyle Shanahan would beat Andy Reid? Like, how could you ever get to that conclusion and make that choice? And you're going to have the all caps keyboard typers spewing out messages. And if it goes the other way, it's like, wow, I bet on Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in the Super Bowl against Brock Purdy. And hey, here's the one time that Purdy showed up and the 49ers got us. Not too bad. Season's over. And so it's this sentiment too, like, how could the Chiefs lose to the 49ers when they just beat the Ravens last week, who were a top team? It's still Mahomes getting points as a dog, better coach, better quarterback, better coordinators. Like, this is I think it's a very real sentiment. It just creates this like massive free roll. I am not saying this as a way to like force yourself into betting the 49ers if you don't like them. It's not where I'm going with this, but the talking points around this game and like the division between it, I find fascinating along this line of like commenting and thinking. I don't remember a Super Bowl that's been like this divisive, I guess is the word I would say, with the trajectory of both teams coming into the game being so different. Like, it's really hard to have a Super Bowl where the team that is the favorite in the game gets to the Super Bowl by playing really, really poorly and getting a lot of breaks going their way. Typically, it's 2 teams that are playing really well, because you have to play well to get to the Super Bowl, that are ascending. And it's a debate between kind of which team still has something left to go further, or it's just the dominant force against the upstart underdog. And you're debating, like, with the extra week, like, should this number be higher? I don't remember a spot where you have this divide between, like, there's a real thought that the Chiefs are like head and shoulders above the 49ers as a better team with better personnel. I don't remember like a spot where there's been this big of a divide. I think it's a really, really interesting talking point for the Super Bowl for sure. A couple more questions to catch up. Yeah, exactly. How could you ever bet that over? The Chiefs had their best offensive output in 3 months. How could you ever bet that over? It was cold, right? And so that's a very real thing too. The other thing I'll touch on, because we haven't got there yet, is the 49ers offense going against the Chiefs defense. And to that point that was brought up earlier about like what are Shanahan going to do and where does that stand? In the newsletter today, which again, if you're interested in joining every Friday, it is free to follow at adamchernoff.com. I included a lot of clips. Something I think that needs to be discussed in this game and talked about more is the physicality of the 49ers wide receivers and skill players, tight ends. The Chiefs defense is dominant. I'm not going to shy away from how great the Chiefs defense is and what Spags has put forth on the field all season. It's been terrific. Like, this is as good of a defense as Spags has had with the Chiefs, as good of a defense as Mahomes has had. And arguably going forward, this is could very well turn into be the best defense in the NFL as they retain some of these guys. The guys in the secondary have gone through just like a rapid forced into playtime growth spot with how the Chiefs had to kind of structure their roster, that these guys, despite being as young as they are just incredibly well battle tested and just playing at an exceptionally high level. And what the Chiefs do is essentially they'll show every offense this too deep safety look. They'll kind of rotate their safeties around to disguise it. And they just trust their corners out wide to play man and go toe-to-toe with any wide receiver, so the Chiefs can dedicate extra attention to stopping the run with size on the field in the middle, because that's the big weakness. And so the Chiefs have essentially protected their biggest weakness, defending the run, by exceptional corner play out wide, which allows Chiefs to have extra guys up front and extra size up front. And what I think is interesting about this game, when I think about the last couple games, is like, look at the Ravens game, for instance. The Chiefs defensive backs didn't give a Ravens wide receiver an inch anywhere. It was as tight coverage across the board all game long. There was nothing conceded anywhere, right? But when you think about what the Ravens wide receivers are, it's Zay Flowers, who isn't like a big physical intimidating force. It's Bateman, who is similar in that category. And then you have like an elderly Odell Beckham Jr. And so you take away Flowers from the equation, there's not a lot of physicality and like explosiveness left out wide. You think about the Bills. They didn't have Gabe Davis. Stephon Diggs, aside from the play middle fourth quarter that was a drop or just an incredibly difficult play to make, however you look at it, you take Diggs out of the equation like Snead was able to do with the help of McDuffie at times, depending where Diggs was on the field. There wasn't a lot of physicality and explosiveness left on that Bills offense. The same thing can be said for the Dolphins. Snead did just a hell of a job on Tyreek Hill, but the Dolphins team as a whole is a very finesse-based offense that was then put in those conditions and that weather. Like, it was really good matchups for the Chiefs. Now you have a 49ers team which plays the second lowest rate of 3 wide receiver sets. They don't get spread out, and they have just absolute maulers and physical presence out wide with these skill guys. Debo is someone who Marlon Humphrey, who's the biggest, most physical corner in the NFL, said he had a hard time tackling and was sore the next day because he had to deal with Debo. Kittle is a highlight reel for blocking every single week, who is just absolutely crushing Hutchinson on the defensive end. Like, Kittle is a menace in the blocking game. You have Juwan Jennings, who took Simone Biles' boyfriend into the Gatorade bucket in the Packers game and is widely regarded as one of the most physical blocking wide receivers in the NFL. So not only does the way that Shanahan prefers to call his offense kind of focus on getting guys open very, very quickly, but he just doesn't get spread out often. And so I see a spot where the 49ers are running from a lot of heavier formations, which is what they like to do, which puts these corners against these physical weapons in a much different challenge and test and bind than what they have faced, not only recently, but really at any point during the regular season. It's such a different test in an offense with the physicality that the 49ers put on the field. Something else that the Chiefs do is with these corners, they play a ton of man coverage out wide. On the season, they're the 7th highest rate for man coverage, but these corners play a ton of press man that's physical at the line. When you look at the 49ers offensive weapons, these guys are all way above average for success rate when facing man coverage on the other side, because Shanahan does such a great job of getting them open, but also because they're so physical at the line that they're really, really hard to jam and keep at the line and play physical and man coverage because of how the 49ers just operate and this size and physicality that these receivers have. And so to me, I think it's a much bigger challenge for the Chiefs defense to keep doing what they have been doing that has got them here in this game specifically. I think it's going to be really, really hard. And I think that the 49ers can win out wide. But I think what you kind of look at, if you're thinking about where can this go and what props might we look at, if it's a spot where the Chiefs, who have just eliminated number one wide receivers all season long, can take out Ayuk out wide. And his numbers are all inflated and the unders are coming in and Ayuk is kind of eliminated. And the 49ers are having success with their creative plays and the pre-snap motion and getting guys open. It probably forces the Chiefs into playing a little bit more zone coverage. At that point that it flips, this opens up for a massive McCaffrey game, both on the ground and receiving. So I don't know what the Chiefs are going to take away. It's a decision that's going to have to be made. But unlike the Bills or the Dolphins or the Ravens or other opponents that the Chiefs have had really good success against when stepping up in class, I don't think you can take everything away for the 49ers. I think it's a matter of what do you decide, and then the 49ers are going to get yards and they're going to beat this defense at times. And it's going to be interesting to see early what that matchup shows. From just like an outlook perspective on my side, I think everything points to just a massive game for McCaffrey. I think he's going to be used a lot of ways that is going to open him up for some big plays. And I think we're going to see a lot of like the Deadpool stuff with Debo utilized. I think Shanahan goes really deep into the playbook. But for me, this game plan that everybody was yelling for last week that the Ravens refused to operate is so in play for the 49ers to utilize in this matchup that they can have some big success on offense. So I think it's a big McCaffrey game. I think the 49ers offense looks really good. We'll catch up on some more questions. 59 and a half minutes. The opening line for the numbers here is coming up. KZ Brown says, what's your favorite Usher's song? I have no idea. I'm waiting for the Garth Brooks halftime. It has to be coming. I don't know if I don't know if the Super Bowl can ever go back to the Superdome. He caused an earthquake at Tiger Stadium in LSU. People want Garth Brooks. I want Garth Brooks. We haven't had a country halftime. We had the country national anthem last year. Everybody loved it because it's great. When do we get like the country music halftime show version and representation of what the Springsteen halftime show was to like classic rock fans? The country version of that is coming. Then I can offer some expertise. It's got to be Brooks. What a show that would be. That might be better than a possible Super Bowl matchup from my perspective. But Usher, I don't know. I can't believe I'm saying Usher on a live stream. Here we are. That's it. Not enough. This is an outrageous take. It's the most consumed music type in the country. Strong disagreement. Not enough fan base. You're a fan. You're in the wrong fan base is how I would look at that. Come on now. Ryan Roberts, coin toss, anthem, or Gatorade color handicap. Coin toss, obviously no. Anthem, I haven't seen what happened. Love Reba. I think she got bet over. I think it's at like 90. I don't know. Gatorade, I don't know. This will all be info-based. I saw somebody, what did they do? They looked at post-game celebration clips from last week and other times, and the 49ers had a ton of clear Gatorade in like all these clips. It was this big mashup. So I don't know. I saw that, but that's something to think about too. Sebastian says, who do you think will have more targets for the Niners, Ayuk or Debo? I would say Debo in this game. Broke out last week. Lions play a lot of man. I think they're going to get him involved kind of quickly and early with a lot of like quick throws out wide. Also going to see him on some slants like over the middle to get him in space. And I think he's going to be involved early. So I would say Debo in that, just because of how well the Chiefs have matched up with number ones, which is absolutely Ayuk. Typically, and I will say this, typically when it is a man coverage game, that's when Ayuk thrives the most. It's been that way this season. I think the way Chiefs play man is different than like to the traditional man coverage snaps, which might put extra emphasis on Ayuk being taken out. But Debo's going to be the guy that's probably moved around a lot more at the line pre-snap, which is why I would lean towards Debo. I will say typically when it is man, that's when you get Ayuk, but I think it's going to be Debo in this too. So I think that's going to stand out. Before we wrap up, if you have any more prop questions that I have missed, please get them in. I'll give you a prop that I like, that I have not talked about yet, that kind of falls in line with, I wouldn't call it a direct derivative of, but just this thought that Christian McCaffrey is going to have a big game and the 49ers are going to play from a lot of heavier personnel packages. Nick Bolton is lined at 2.5 assists. The over is around -140. Against the 49ers this season, linebackers have had a massive amount of tackle opportunities. And when you look at the sort of like the mic'd up clips of Chiefs games, especially down the stretch, Bolton is in the middle of everything, trying to sniff out runs and screens. Well, obviously, he's a linebacker, is a point. But like the way that he's leading the middle of this defense against Miami, against Buffalo when Cook was involved a lot, last week against the Ravens, just a monster presence in the middle against a lot of the plays that the 49ers like to run offensively. And an interesting note is cornerbacks and defensive backs against the 49ers have the least tackles per game of any opponent all season. So what that means is when you play the 49ers, tackle opportunities for linebackers go through the roof. Tackles for corners and DBs come way down. And specifically, this is from a note from Mike Clay, who's awesome. There have been 25 different off-ball linebackers who have produced 3 or more assists against the 49ers so far this season. The 49ers have played 19 games. 25 different guys at this position have gone over 2.5. Like think about that for a second. That shows you how and where the 49ers attack. And Bolton is going to be that guy on the other side. So Bolton assists a pretty comfortable over at 2.5 -140, even 3.5 +105, just based on how I think the 49ers are going to run their offense and what you're going to get out of McCaffrey. I think that that's an interesting look. I would say another look too, and again, this is kind of like availability difficulty. The 49ers, all players combined, total rushing yards for the game is around 122.5. I think you can bet that over, considering Shanahan and his ability to target and exploit weaknesses of defenses, how many guys on the Niners can get involved in the running game, how big of a game McCaffrey may end up having. I think that number stands out as looking pretty good too. And so again, there's kind of scattered availability with all of these. And so that's something that I think you can look at too, and stand out in a pretty big way. Do you still like Debo at plus 3,500 for MVP? If you got the newsletter last week and you got the 65-1, you're in a great spot. 35-1 was less than the floor, which I put on that bet at 40-1. So I don't love that now at 35-1. I would say that current market, I've seen like 20s. So 35 is kind of what I would say like an off-market price. So if you're looking at that, you can kind of see that. But if you have tickets from earlier, you can sit on that. Garrett, McCaffrey MVP at 4-1 is a hedge off Debo. I mean, you're sitting on a great ticket. I'm pretty sure you were on the newsletter and you bet it last week. If you have that, you can hold on to that. Jay Karma says Willie Gay in regards to covering tight ends. There you go. Good answer for you there, big dogs. All right, 59.5 minutes. We wrapped it up. I'm going to officially call this the end just so that bet stays under. That was a very good number. early on in the chat before the show even really got rolling. I said it ended at 59-29. So that's a heck of a number on who said that earlier in the chat. Again, everybody, I want to remind you that the free off-season newsletter, first time I've been doing off-season content, is available at adamchernoff.com if you want to follow up. There's so much to talk about with coaches and coordinators and diving into specific things that are discussed around the NFL that can help you think about the NFL differently. It's going to be a great opportunity to dive into so many things. If you want to follow that, it's free to your email inbox every Friday. I'm looking forward to doing off-season content for the first time. It's not something I ever thought that I would do, but grateful to have the opportunity to do that, and hopefully you will enjoy it as well. And so if you want to join that too, that is available for you to do so. I want to say thank you to everybody who has joined these live streams all season long. To go from 300 views in the first one to 10,000 likely here on the Super Bowl is pretty special, and that's all because of what you guys have done and participated all season. I hope at some point during the year I've offered just even a little bit of value that has led you to make a bet on something that you've hopefully won and made you a little bit of money, or at least giving you something different to think about when it comes to betting and looking at the NFL. We'll definitely be doing these again next year. So keep the YouTube channel subscribe on. Keep that turned on as well. I also know we will very, 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 very likely be doing something for March Madness as well. So these videos will be coming back in a couple weeks' time. So that will all be up and available for you to follow, as well as keeping up with me on the newsletter every single Friday. So that will be great as well. So keep that in line. But again, thank you to everybody who has been participating in these live streams, subscribe to the channel, following the service. It has been a phenomenal year for NFL betting from the service. I appreciate everybody who jumped over and subscribed in the preseason. Hopefully, we end it with another one on San Francisco, get over the 20-unit mark for the season, and we get right into looking at futures next year, which will begin going out in May and in June. Thank you again, everybody. Can't say it enough. Appreciate all the time each of you have given to the channel. I'll wrap up the stream. We'll wrap up the season, and we'll look forward to a 49ers win in the Super Bowl. We'll chat to you guys on the next stream.